serves in the Institute of Medicine Standing Committee on Childhood Obesity Prevention and the National Physical Activity Plan Coordinating Committee, the California Department of Public Health Advisory Committee, and the boards of directors of the Public Health Institute, Action for Healthy Kids, and the Partnership for a Healthier America, the nonprofit supporting First Lady Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign to end the childhood obesity epidemic. Today we're here, of course, to really celebrate her second book and to hear from her about the book and to buy the book and to sign the book. The book is called Instant Recess, Building a Fit Nation, 10 Minutes at a Time. I'm really excited about this because I'm really into fitness. I want to hear what you have to say. University of California Press was released in September 2010. We have a very intimate crowd today, so that means we can ask lots of questions. We can be very selfish in terms of the questions we ask because we have lots of time. So without further ado, Dr. Yancey.
So thanks for coming out today. I know that it's a very hot day, so we do have more challenges than normal. It's really great to be here and this actually Wednesday, day before yesterday, was the formal release date of the book, even though it's been kind of floating around, available on Amazon and some other places since the end of the month of September. This book really came out of the last primarily 10 years of my research and community outreach work, but really even has its origins probably about 20 years ago. And the challenge is that as human beings, we're really not programmed to be physically active. Now, there are a few of us, and probably many in this room, that are very conscientious, that love to go to the gym, play sports, whatever. But we're in the very small minority, because actually it's fewer than 5% of adults that get the 30 minutes a day, 5 or more days a week of activity. So we have a lot of disparities in health status. I mean, that's no surprise to anybody. As African Americans, in particular, we're at the bottom of the boat in terms of a lot of the problems that we hear about all the time on TV, on the radio: obesity, chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, stroke. So my thinking is, how do we kind of turn this on its head a little bit? And rather than kind of being at the bottom of the heap, how do we sort of be, how do we seize the lead in turning this around and being a more active and fit society? And one of the approaches is, rather than coming from the place of cultural deficits, like there's something wrong with African Americans, that we're obese and unfit and blah, blah, blah. I mean, recognizing the environmental influences on how we got into this position, but also recognizing the assets that we have as African Americans that can help us turn this around, and not just for ourselves, but also to sort of lead the nation. And if you look at some problems like tobacco control, we've had some amazing successes. I mean, here in California, lung cancer rates have gone down as a function of all the, excise tax and smoking bans and all this sort of thing. But there's still pockets of need, and those are concentrated in communities of color, including among working class African Americans. So how do we, rather than being kind of left behind, how do we get out front? And one of our cultural assets is that we love to dance. Music, dance traditions, I mean, those are part of our culture. Okay, you go to a black party, you generally are dancing. Okay, you go to a white party, you're drinking maybe, probably not doing as much dancing, if any dancing. I mean, it's what is part of the cultural fabric. And so moving in a group to music is part of the cultural fabric. And in fact, having done tens of thousands of these exercise breaks over the last 10 years since we started them in LA County, I can tell you the least comfortable people in the room are usually affluent white males. But that's okay, because they invented the jogging tradition, and they have other things that, they're more likely to do. Culturally, we're more likely to do something like this. So let me just share with you a few little segments of the book, and let me also say, and it kind of taps into your point, Darnell, about how you yourself are into fitness. A lot of times those of us that are into fitness think, well, we're doing it, so why doesn't everybody else do it? And you know, I really feel, and I said this in the preface to my books. I'm going to read you actually this little section of the preface. I feel in my bones, have for a long time, that movers and shakers, literally athletes and former athletes, dancers, playground hackers, hikers and nature lovers, military types, putterers and fidgeters will be the catalysts for community-wide fitness promotion. Of course, we're also part of the problem because we're the plurality, if not the majority, of physical activity researchers and practitioners, and we think that everybody thinks like us. So if you build it, they will come. So I think that this is an opportunity, and who knows whether it's exactly the strategy of doing these 10-minute exercise breaks. It could be something else. But I mean, I do think that we have the cultural wherewithal to sort of turn this around and to take some leadership in this area, and I hope that the book can provide a spark plug for that. So I'm going to read from you a section of the introduction where I talk a little bit about, you know, kind of what is this all about, where did this idea come from. Remember when we were kids, we could eat all we wanted, or all our parents could afford, and run all day without feeling tired. We could go from 0 to 60 without stretching and warming up or hurting ourselves. We didn't have a dozen deadlines, a house to clean, parents to care for, kids and grandkids to pick up after. Movement wasn't exercise, it was joyous and fun. Fast forward to my arrival back in LA to start a chronic disease division at the county health department. I thought, why not recess for adults? Recess breaks at work could boost energy levels, get the blood flowing back from the buns to the brain, alleviate stress, lift spirits, just as they do for kids. They could be done right in the workspace, anytime, in any attire, by anybody. After all, how many women dance the night away in high-heeled shoes that would probably break my ankles? Okay? So, how about a little instant recess? Okay? Just add music and shake your booty. An instant recess break is a brief, low-impact, simple, structured group physical activity for adults and kids. It's usually done to music and is integrated into the organizational routine at work, school, meetings, churches, sports stadiums, and other settings in which people gather. If we do it right, this relatively inexpensive approach could lay the foundation for longer-term strategies. Granted, it won't solve all of our problems. It's going to take more than 10 minutes a day to completely arrest the epidemic of chronic disease and obesity, but it's a way of getting the ball rolling, a small step in the right direction. And as many of you know, we're supposed to be aiming to get our 10,000 steps a day. Well, you know, a lot of us fall fairly far short of that. But the whole thing of recess and of physical activity, framing it as something fun, is really what I'm trying to do and what I've been trying to do in my research and in my community outreach work and my public service work for this last 20 years. And I want to share a poem with you. This is probably, I'll kind of go in and out of talking a little about the book itself, but the book started out to be an academic book. It's from the University of California Press, that kind of makes sense, but over time it evolved, and I hired or paid a small amount of honorarium to a guy that I've done public health commentaries for on KPCC, John Raby, and he's just always been great at digesting down my, 1,000-word, very scientifically jargoned, essays into like a 450-word, hard-hitting, succinct piece. So he worked with me stylistically to kind of really help me recapture the voice that I had before I started containing it in scientific writing. And also, I'm a poet. My first book was actually called An Old Soul with a Young Spirit, Poetry in the Era of Desegregation Recovery. So it was a book of poetry and art, collaboration with an artist, Todd Berrien. So when they tried to push me more and more to include the personal sort of story element, the anecdotes of, the work that I've been doing, then, it just seemed natural to put a little poetry in. So there's 7 of my poems in the book. And this first one in the introduction is called Recapturing Recess. Now I know y'all can remember the recess bell, the wave of exhilaration, the sigh of relief, the sheer release, the transformation of fidgeting into linear motion. Raise up your hands if you can remember all that pent-up energy exploding into air and space and wind and sunshine. And if you can recapture even a little of the joy of unbridled movement, then just maybe there's hope for the couch potatoes. Those of you too worn down even to fidget. You think you need rest and food, but you toss and turn in bed and meals don't really sit well. These bodies just weren't meant for so much sitting and standing and so little recess. Now, I'm going to fast forward for a moment. I'm going to go to the marketing chapter. So the way that the book is laid out, there are 7 chapters. So there's the introduction that kind of walks you through the whole concept overall. The first chapter talks about the problem, the sedentariness of America, how we got into this situation. The second chapter is about what the benefits are of becoming more physically active across the whole population. I mean, what could that do for us? And, I would argue that if we want to have in healthcare reform legislation, if we're serious about prevention, most of that prevention needs to go on outside of the medical encounter. So if we're going to have, say, employer incentives, for workers, if they do it the normal way, like building a fitness center on site, all that's going to do is shift people who are working out on their own dime, on their own time, over to working out at work. It really doesn't typically engage people that are sedentary. So in order to have a real return on investment for either us as a country in terms of our taxes, for employer incentives, or for the regular employer, for a school principal, if you want to have better test scores, if you want to have better discipline. So any kind of organization, I mean, this really delivers a return on investment because it gets the people that most need it to do a little something. Most of our efforts to promote physical activity get a few people to do a lot. And that's just, it's not sustainable. It hasn't worked over the last 40 years, and yet we perseverate in doing it that way. So I wanted to share with you another of the poems in the book, and this actually is from the 4th chapter. The 3rd chapter is called The Evolution of an Idea, and basically I walk you through how I kind of got from point A to point B, from doing fashion modeling right after my medical school and internship period in New York, and seeing, kind of up close and personal, first of all, the issues, the charts that are stacked this high, can't write fast enough to write prescriptions for all the chronic illnesses. The chief complaint, chief complaint when I was in medical school meant, what's the main one? Well, congestive heart failure, diabetes, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they were all chief complaints. So I realized we weren't getting anywhere fast with that. And secondly, I realized as a function of modeling that, we've got white paper with a little print on it that we want to hand out to people and expect to have an influence on their behavior when, commercial marketing is, out there with all kinds of seductive advertising, really getting into people's heads and into their cultures in terms of figuring out what it is that's going to drive behavior and hitting it over and over again. Well, we may not have the deep pockets to do all of that, but we can do better. And that's what the 4th chapter is about, is kind of the social marketing. How can we learn from commercial marketing and do a better job? So like, for instance, framing. The framing that I talked about of physical activity is fun, because a lot of people still want to promote it as an obligation. Like, I was on the Physical Activity Guidelines Advisory Committee, so for the first time, as of 2008, we have physical activity, guidelines for Americans that go along with the dietary guidelines for Americans. But one of my colleagues said, well, people should just feel about physical activity like they feel about brushing their teeth. They just do it every day. It's like, that's not how I want to approach it. I don't want people to feel like it's another obligation of the other 12,000 that they have. I want them to look forward to it. I want them to see it as an opportunity for something other than obligation and exertion. So that's the 4th chapter. The 5th chapter is really about kind of how the exercise break idea itself evolved and what some of the data is that supports it and how some people have put it into practice. some of the, we've had like about 3 or 4 different grants from the federal government to actually implement these physical activity breaks and other organizational practices and policy changes. So this chapter talks about that, and it also has a table where I kind of link the organizational side to the individual side. So I call it anchoring. You know, if you want to make a change in your own behavior, great. But if you want it to be sustained, if you really want it to last over time, then you can anchor it within an organizational structure. So it's great if you want to walk, but if you get every Wednesday at the gospel choir rehearsal, if you get them doing a 10-minute exercise break, that's going to serve as a reminder. It's an anchor for all the rest of the activity that you want to do. And so those are some of the kinds of ideas. 6th chapter is called The Case for Instant Recess. What's good for the waistline is good for the bottom line. Okay, and that's really to say, hey, businesses, churches, you know, if you're a church, if you're a minister, and you want to have your parishioners around longer, able to tithe, able to volunteer for the various activities, I mean, this makes sense. So again, it's not about leaving it on the individual, because we continue to do that. We cannot educate people into this behavior. We have to build it into society, because that's the way that it originally was. We never had to go out of the way for exercise. We had to do it in order to eat and transport ourselves and escape predators and find shelter or maintain that shelter. So exercise is something that, if anything, we went out of our way to avoid in our leisure time. Okay, and that's still kind of how our genes work. Okay, so that's why this idea of having exercise breaks is kind of what we call a push or an opt-out strategy. So we're trying to make it something that people have to trip over, the path of least resistance, as opposed to now where it's something you have to, you know, swim rivers and, you know, climb mountains to get to. So this poem from chapter 3 is called Ain't Like There's Hunger. Sweet tooth, salt tooth, chocolate tooth, jonesing for fries, triple deck mac, coke, and pork rinds. But no swimming tooth, stretching tooth, dancing tooth, weightlifting tooth. After all, ain't like there's hunger. Mind numbing early gig. Second gig even worse. Kids in between got to be red, fed tooth, red tooth, homework checked, ears inspected, dark part, cold out. After all, ain't like there's hunger. Sitting all day trying to look nice. Due costing $30, $40 a week, heels and hugging skirt, and this 50 extra pounds I'm carrying around. Steers are a joke. Walking at lunch, humidity wrecked my hair. After all, ain't like there's hunger. TV and radio ads for the Mickey D's, KFC's, Taco Bell's, Krispy Kremes, and wind shells. Seeing me, my kind of folks. Hearing me, my kind of folks. Golden arches right round the corner, open late, open early, open 24/7. And then there's hunger. CEOs making all this money, making us fat and old and sick and dead. Fat bankroll, fat money. Blood money is what it really is. Expanding bottom lines, expanding our behinds and waistlines, because after all, ain't like there's real hunger. So being a nation of couch potatoes, or mouse potatoes, is it really that bad? Why don't they make it easy? Perk me up since I'm usually down. Where I work, on the company's clock. Yeah, how about a little recess like when we were kids in school? I might take a stroll on their time, or find some jam and tunes for my little group, packing some extra pounds. Been a while since we got down, shifting and moving and swinging and grooving. Get that natural high flowing. Now that might make me hungry for more. So let me just wrap this up. Basically, the book is a tool for vaulting this discussion to another level. I mean, you know, a lot of people are talking within, you know, the groups within public health and medicine and all of that, and that's fine, but I really feel as if the only way that we're going to make a change is for our entire society to change. And, you know, if we think about this generation as possibly, for the first time in recorded history, experiencing a shorter lifespan than we do, that's kind of time to sit up and take notice. And that's actually the one statistic of all of them that got the First Lady's attention. And when we met with her in April as a board, we had 1 hour with her, And she's very genuine and very, much about the business of, what we need to be doing with this. I mean, it certainly is a great political thing for her to do, but I don't think that's all it's about. And I really think that as a society we have to change. We always want to point the finger and say, well, they should be doing this and they should, let's point a mirror back at ourselves and what can we all do to shift the social norms, to make sedentary behavior unacceptable. I'd like it to be just as socially unacceptable to sit for hours on end as it is to smoke or to drink and drive, because I guarantee you 30 years ago somebody would have been smoking in this room right now. We've experienced a major change, a major advancement, and we've done it in several areas, and we could do this too. It's within our grasp. So let me just stop there, and what I wanted to do was show you a couple of minutes of an exercise break. You hear about instant recess. Okay, building a fit nation. What's an instant recess break? Well, I want you to actually see and experience what that is. Right here. Oh. Let's see. Is it possible to keep one on in the back? Just so people know.
We're okay.
We can see.
We can see.
All right.
I grew up dancing. That is total exercise. That's in our culture. That's in my tradition. I still do it. I still go out there. I still dance. A long time ago, our warriors did their exercises by dancing, riding their horses, foot races, all different forms of exercise. Everything came from Mother Earth. There was no such thing as a disease here like diabetes. We're trying to incorporate an exercise program that will evolve our culture and our traditions.
Hi, I'm Dr. Antronette Yancey from the UCLA School of Public Health. Welcome to Instant Recess. Now, for about the past decade, we've been doing these short exercise breaks and bringing them to people's workplaces and schools and churches, basically wherever people gather. We're really grateful to have been able to team up with folks from Montana State University and right here at the Fort Peck Reservation to bring American Indian dance traditions to Instant Recess. I'm Jamie, I'm with Adrian.
One of my doctoral students who also is a choreographer, exercise scientist.
Let's speed movement. Let's go ahead and take a little
Stand up.
two-step. Real slow.
Just check it out, just try it. Nothing hard. You want to do it in a seat, you can just do the arm movements.
Find the rhythm. Very important to do. Make sure you find the rhythm. Now that everyone seems to have this okay, we're going to speed it up a little bit. Left, right. Good.
So basically what he did was,
We're going to hold on to this movement.
we got a lot of powwow dance
Transition.
footage, and he adapted that and identified basic movements that could be very simplified and
You get
scaled
this
down.
going, so go ahead and twist
And,
it to the side.
So like most instant recess breaks, each move
Very
is
important to
pretty
do.
simplified and has
Before you start any
a
type of
basic
exercise, everything
kind of
nice and
catchy
easy.
name. And
Good. Keep going.
My grandfather, when he raised us, he used to tell us, you got to keep moving, exercise your muscles. So we was constantly moving all the time.
All right, now we're going to transition into what I call the bounce. You're going to go ahead and drop down, up, nice and slow. You want to go down too far. You don't want to put any pressure on your knees.
so you can see, I mean,
Wait,
there's always attention to the
And make sure you listen to the
back,
ground.
making it something that's accessible to the average person. It's not for athletes. I mean, it's for athletes to lead and to make it possible for this to
Give
happen.
me a little shoulder shrug.
That's the principle of the high school there on the reservation with the red on there.
Keep this up in the lower body. Roll that arm. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, To the other side. 1, 2, 1, 2. Good. 1, 2, 1, 2. Alternate. One more on each side. All right. Let's go ahead and get started with our first movement. Let's get our 2-step. We're going to be doing the chicken dance. Now that we got our nice little 2-step, I want you to bend from the hips and the waist. Get that back side down. You want to make sure the knee stays behind the toe. So you don't want to put any undue pressure on your knee. Arms going to go up to your waist. Very good. Now, when you take that step towards the other foot, you're going to push that chest out. Lock those wings.
Now, if you've been sitting for a long time, this will feel very good.
Warriors had no
Let
fear.
stress out of your shoulders.
They kept themselves in tune.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, all the way up. Keep your 2 steps.
All right, you've had your sample.
Excellent.
So let me just open it up for questions. Questions, comments? Yes, Alex.
First of all, I want to say that was a very wonderful presentation. I'm definitely, in my 10 years here, one of the most interactive lectures that we've had and talked. And I want to give you a hand for that. But I have a question for you. I mean, what you're saying is obviously very true. And with the advent of more, and I'll tie this into maybe something that Dr. Hunt can relate to, with media, you have more fitness shows on. It used to be the time where you had to go, you'd have to look for it. You know, you had the Denise Austins and others. Now, I know with my, with DirecTV, you have Fit TV, and they find different ways to reach different segments of the population. Are you finding that in some of your research and in some of your consultations that is actually helping when you look at a correlation of media, fitness type programs like what you showed here, where you have all ages, is that helping the overall health of people?
Well, I would say that the way that it's been done up until now has really not been shown to help. It's not to say that it hasn't helped specific individuals, but at a population level, as long as it's something that people have to themselves, you know, turn on themselves, be motivated to do, it's in their homes, it's not going to work. I mean, that's the way that we've been trying to do it. I mean, it's again, it's great. It's a part of the overall awareness. It's very important that, you know, there's been an explosion of shows. There's a problem with certain types of shows. Like, I'm really not a fan of The Biggest Loser at all. And the reason is because people lose the weight and then they regain the weight. You know, it takes them out of their environment rather than teaching them how to cope within their environment. Changing that environment takes them all the way out. It's not a sustainable model. However, this type of thing, or even the shows that you're talking about, and actually one of the things that I talk about in Chapter 7, I forgot to mention, Chapter 7 is actually called A Glimpse of the Future. So I'm projecting, like, if Oprah decided to do this once a week, and if, you know, Usher, you know, produces his first instant recess break, which he's actually agreed to do, and if a lot of other things happen, then this could really become viral. And once it's a part of actually how we live our lives, it's a part of our church services, it's a part of our school day, not just the PE and recess, which is a lot of it's not even going on, but it's happening during the regular school day because it's helpful. It helps executive functioning, it helps mood, it helps energy. So once we get to the point where the impetus or motivation to have this exercise is not at the individual level, but it's actually at the level of the leaders who recognize that this serves their organizational purposes. It's a competitive advantage, and that's actually a model, and I have a, you know, kind of simplified version of it in the book, but it's also published last year, called the Meta-Volition model. Meta-Volition is a neologism, just means that it's the impetus that comes not from the individual, but from leaders who are looking to accomplish something that they're already incentivized to accomplish. So, you know, if you're the head of a health department, you already have somebody going through and showing you these are the targets that we want you to hit and blah, blah, blah. So you got that motivation. If you're a business leader, you got, a financial bottom line. So that's where I want to shift it, is from being the responsibility being on individual people to, as a society, we become too sedentary, we become overweight, and we all have to do something about it.
Now, is that in relationship to, we were discussing earlier about you with the Board of Supervisors for the county? What was their reaction and what were their promises?
Well, I've done this at some meetings that the board has been attending. I haven't actually done this at the board itself. That's a part of the discussion. Last time I talked to them, they were like, well, if you can get a couple of Lakers to come over, whatever. Well, we got the Lakers in some of our instant recess DVDs. That's not a problem. But I've started to have the discussion with Mark Ridley Thomas, who actually attended the launch of instant recess at the Sparks. So the Sparks WNBA team created something called Sparking Motion in conjunction with us in the county health department, and they launched it. They had an instant recess break during one of their timeouts, and they've done a few of these over the course of the last season. Hopefully we're ramping up even more next year. But the idea would be for there to be a policy that actually permits, or better yet, mandates an opportunity for people to have 10 minutes of paid time to do physical activity. Now, people can opt out of it, but that's the whole point, is opt out. Not have to opt in, not have to go out of your way, but if you don't want to participate, then you got to go out of your way to avoid it.
Yeah, I think you're touching on the question I had as I was watching this, thinking about the institutional dimension of the whole thing. And as you pointed out, getting beyond the individual to having this incorporated at the level of society. You think about places like China, for example, you see these images of people having these mass exercise sessions out in the middle of the park. It becomes a part of the culture.
Yes.
So it's not like something that you have to go out of your way to do.
Right.
You just do it as part of your routine.
Right.
And the way our society is evolving, we're moving more towards sort of like this virtual information society where we're sitting in front of computer screens all the time.
Yep.
We're doing more of our work that way, and we're having to physically move less.
Right.
Even if you think about people coming into work 3 days a week as opposed to 5,
Absolutely.
So how do you, given those large-scale societal changes, incorporate something like this into the routine of people when they don't really have to move,
Right.
whereas we had to, as you pointed out before.
Right.
So I guess, you touched on some of it, ways of possibly convincing those who lead organizations that it really does benefit your bottom line to have a workforce that's more active.
Mm-hmm.
My own personal experience is, this is one of the reasons that I'm motivated to try to remain fit, because I see the difference when
Yes.
I'm, sort of have a nice workout, and I come in, my mind's clear, I can actually be more productive. But I think the perception from outside is that, well, that's time that you could have been spent on this, not recognizing that you're probably more efficient and more effective than what you do if you invest the time to get the physical activity. So how do you convince people of something that might seem otherwise counterintuitive?
Well, I just touched on this idea of this model that I created, the meta-volition model, and what it is a way of talking about how to make this happen. So exactly to your point, how do we instigate that change? So I would argue that people like me, public health leaders who have understood, what's happened in other movements, how they've been created, like tobacco control and so forth, and how we've changed the social norms. We convince organizational leaders, and it's not going to be all of them, but the early adopters are going to be able to see, oh wow, if I adopt this innovation, then that's going to help me, I'm going to have an advantage. Those are the people we try to hit, and in the book I actually have profiled some of those companies. So LL Bean Plan in Maine, for 30 years now, they've been stopping the assembly lines and doing 5 minutes of exercise three times during the day. 15-minute investment, 30-minute return on investment. So and this is a hard outcome. So, Darnell, well, was he more productive after well, it's hard to say. But with this, you can actually measure their bags, belts, shoes, whatever they produce. Okay, 100% return on investment. 30 minutes of productivity for the 15 minutes invested, to the point that now they actually stop the assembly lines for a few minutes every hour. And they retain the same level of productivity, even though that's even more than 15 minutes that they're now investing. Replacement's limited. It's a China factory in Greensboro, North Carolina. They've been doing, I think, about 15 minutes a day of physical activity breaks. They actually have lowered their workers' comp rating, okay, which means that they're paying less for their workers' comp insurance. I mean, these are the types of things that I think if we can get that message out there, then it's going to make, and combined with, and this is another model called diffusion of innovations, one of its tenets is that if something is trialable, then it's more likely to be adopted. So it doesn't take much. You know, you pop in a DVD, you know, you got somebody who, you know, is a fitness instructor, they lead it. It's very easy to adopt something like this. You didn't have to build a track or a fitness facility. You didn't have to buy any expensive equipment. You can do it right where you are. And that's the other piece of it that I think I can say in arguing to people, hey, why not at least give it a shot? And we've had success. I mean, we actually have a CDC grant where we've helped organizations provide technical assistance and training and materials like these kind of DVDs. And by the way, I brought some, so if anybody's interested in the one that you just saw, I have a few to give away. But we've actually been able to document a significant increase in adoption of policies like exercise breaks, specifically exercise breaks, because that's kind of the centerpiece of what we're promoting. So it can be done. And you know, most of the organizations I'm working with are those that serve people of color, African Americans and Latinos. So again, I think we're on the leading edge of something, as opposed to always being, you know, kind of at the back end, last to get it, last to benefit from it. Other questions? Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to emphasize the influence of the environment and corporations on individual behavior.
Mm-hmm.
What can I, as a consumer, do to pressure corporations to make those initial investments in their workforces and in their products to facilitate the improvement of health, public health?
Well, as a consumer, I'd say there are a couple of things you can do. One is look at your own decisional latitude, your own sphere of influence, and see where are the opportunities. Are you a member of a church where you can talk to the minister and say, hey, look, see this book? They talk about actually churches where they have implemented in the church services, the gospel choir rehearsals, the Bible study classes, these exercise breaks. It's not only, you know, been like a morale builder, something that's uplifted people, but it's also actually driven more people into their gospel aerobics classes, you know, because it's that reminder again, it's that anchor. So I would say look at your own world and say, what's going on in my workplace? Can I convince my boss? What's going on, you know, at my kid's school or my, you know, brother's kid's school? I would look at that first. And then the second thing is on a larger policy level, you can go to a city council meeting. And you know, that's why I wrote the book. Take it someplace and say, hey, look, you know, there's documentation. Duarte, the city of Duarte, right near Pasadena, for 6 years now, they've been doing brief, like 3-minute physical activity breaks based on the work that we did 10 years ago at the county, and every city council meeting. And then that goes out over the cable and people see it. So I mean, there's little niduses of activity in a lot of different places, and I was just trying to bring it all together in one place so that we could make that argument.
Is there a group of corporations that you think that you would recommend us patronizing more than others? Are there any resources?
I can't really say that. I mean, I just have been starting to work with the National Business Group on Health, which is kind of the Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies, and several of them have actually begun to adopt, you know, pieces of this. And I can, you know, I can't say, you know, which ones, and so therefore shop at this one because they've been doing more. But what I can say is that the early adopters among them are starting to look at this. And that's partly why they invited me to come and give a talk. I mean, partly they invited me, I'm sure, because of being on the First Ladies Committee, and now everybody thinks that's a direct conduit to, you know, POTUS and FLOTUS. But you know, I think there is the recognition that what they've been doing is not working. And they've made some strides in terms of nutrition. So a lot of places have healthier vending, competitive pricing so that the healthy option is, you know, comparable to the other, all that kind of stuff. But on the physical activity end, they still have typically made it a voluntary thing in your own time. Fitness class after work or during lunch, a walking club here, fitness equipment over in the corner, it doesn't work, and they're recognizing that. So I think that they're starting to look at these kinds of approaches. You know, there's a cartoon in there with, you know, a boardroom with treadmills around the table that people are on rather than sitting in chairs. You know, so, you know, I have a Trek desk. We got a couple of Trek desks with the guy that makes these things where it sits over. There's a treadmill, there's a desk, and you walk at a very slow speed while you're typing on your computer and doing all that stuff. But again, those are expensive things. I'm talking about something cheap that can, you know, lead the way toward these other larger investments.
So that's basically the difference then, is having, it's like even right here, even at UCLA, they've been in the last year or two trying to encourage people to do more physical activity. They have a lot of things, but it is, you're right, it's during lunch or you can before work. There's several opportunities, but not everybody can take advantage of that. So what you're saying then is having it during our work time or the other.
Exactly. I'm saying during your work time, and I know the efforts you're talking about. It's like with Mick DeLuca and the whole, you know, the group. Yeah, and I've been talking to them too with the UC Wellness Committee. I've been sitting on it, but you know, it's hard to make a change. I mean, it's like turning the Titanic. Everybody keeps going back to, oh, but people can just do. Well, people are not. They're voting with their feet and they're not going out and doing it. We have a beautiful campus. If people aren't doing it here, then where are they going to be doing it? So you're making my point exactly. You know, we got to build it right in, Darlene.
Oh, I was going to say, can you speak to what's going on in Mexico?
Sure. A board that I'm on, Public Health Institute, one of the other board members was the kind of like in the position of CDC director, or the equivalent of the CDC director, their Mexican Ministry of Health. And around the same time that we developed these exercise breaks here, they developed something called Pausa para tu Salud, pause for your health. And they actually collect clinical data on their employees every year. So this was not a study. We actually helped them with a secondary data analysis. And what we are able to demonstrate is that in a year's time, with that being the only intervention, I mean, they handed out flyers and, you know, passed out brochures just like any other time, but the only real intervention was this, and they were able to document a 2-pound weight loss and a little over a half of an inch waist loss in a year's time. Okay, so again, now I can't say it was just the 10 minutes. Maybe it was because people were going for more walks in their spare time, but that's okay. That's a spillover effect. That was still instigated by this brief bout that can, you know, spark people. It can remind people, again, that's the whole recess thing. A lot of people forgot that it feels good to move. You know, it's not hard to forget in our society.
I think that's true, just reminding, helping people say, hey, this feels good, or I feel better, or just, and then it may encourage them to do more.
Exactly. And it may encourage our society to do more. And that's, you know, there's actually a picture. I paid for a lot of the use of photos and cartoons and stuff just to break things up. But there's one where you've got what looks like the 405 freeway, but with bike lanes and just one little car lane with a little car drawn into it. I mean, that would be great, but we don't have a political will to do that. People ain't giving up their rides. People aren't, you know. So, I mean, until we can get to the point where mass transit is preferred, until we can get to the point that we have auto-free zones and all that, let's start someplace, because otherwise we're going to lose another generation. And childhood obesity is no joke. I mean, I was in medical school in the stroke belt, you know, Duke University, Durham, North Carolina, and I never saw anybody under the age of 40 with type 2 diabetes. And now that's more than half of the diabetes that we're seeing in kids, like places like here in LA. Yes, sir.
How do you see this developing among the youth, especially in education when they're cutting, you know, we were talking about cutting recess and PE from schools. How do you see this catching on moving forward?
Well, I see it addressing it, and let me give you the example. We've had a couple of places where we piloted this. There was a charter school in Phoenix, and actually this guy, Junior Taylor, that played football here at UCLA, is their athletic director, and we just met him. We were in New York at a play conference, and he was there, and they adopted it in their charter schools. And these are charter schools where they already are actually doing an hour every day of PE. And what he said is they saw a difference, especially in the girls, in more actively participating in PE. Because that's the other thing. You can have more PE, you can mandate more minutes, but if kids are just sitting down during those minutes, it's not going to help anything. What we saw is that the addition of these brief bouts of activity reintroduces kids to movement, which is something that a lot of them have lost out on the opportunity to do. I know our time is kind of getting to the end, and you said that you had to run, so I don't know if you if you want a book, then I can stop and.
That's okay.
Okay, you'll get one another time. Okay, good. All right, take care. Other
Quick
questions?
question, is there a companion nutritional piece to this? I mean, obviously nutrition matters, but, you know, I mean, I guess this, if everything were the same, this would be an improvement, but.
Well, actually, nutrition isn't integrated into my overall set of organizational practices and policies as well as individual policies. So it's not that I've forgotten about it, it's just that I put physical activity first. And I'll tell you, part of the reason why is that if we don't do something about physical activity, we can't eat little enough to be able to restore weight, balance, restore energy balance. I mean, we've got to get physical activity up just to be able to burn enough calories to get all the micronutrients that we're telling people they need to get every day. So that's one piece. And then the other piece is that people tend to take better care of themselves when they feel better. A big reason that people don't do things is because of depression. Physical activity is one of the few things that actually gives an immediate lift to mood. And I know I'm relying on it. You just said that you need that. I mean, if I don't get my physical activity for a couple of days, I mean, I really just do not manage stress as well. So I think for that reason I argue that it's foundational, but we do promote fruit baskets instead of candy, dishes on people's desks. We promote getting healthier foods in the vending machines, competitively priced, because if the banana is $2 and the candy's 50 cents, I mean, you haven't done anything. So yeah, and that's, these organizational practices and policies are also included on the nutrition end. Other questions or comments? Well, anybody that wants a book, I'm happy to sign them, and please, tell your friends and colleagues, go on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever. I mean, the books are actually even cheaper, on Barnes & Noble and Amazon and all that. So, but since I have to schlep them around, I charge just a little under the list price of $22.95. So, but please, I really am. I'm trying to start a movement here. I mean, I'd like for this to happen, and I'd like for it to happen where people already are, not for people to have to go out of their way for it.